The fluorescent hum of a new school often amplifies the anxieties of adolescence, shrinking one's inner world. For Amara Jennings, arriving at Bakersfield South Ridge Middle at 14, that feeling was palpable. The worn strap of her backpack was her sole anchor in this unfamiliar terrain. South Ridge wasn't opulent, yet it possessed that characteristic Californian patina, dust motes dancing in the sunbeams clinging to brickwork, the faint, tarry scent of the asphalt. The main office buzzed with hushed conversations and the sporadic electronic chirp of the scanner. No one registered her entrance. She was simply another new student. The secretary, devoid of warmth, slid her schedule across the counter. A silent transaction. Lockers down the C hall was the curt direction. Her mother's parting words echoed, "Keep your focus, baby. You're there to learn, not to seek approval." This became Amara's quiet resolve. Minimal disruption, diligent study, immersion in her music, and a year navigated without incident. Yet, her very stillness seemed to attract unwanted attention, a paradox of observation. By midday, labels had begun to circulate. Violin girl, the quiet one, new girl with the striking eyes, whispered fragments that brushed against her awareness. She remained unfazed. The destination that truly mattered was Orchestra Room 117, her final class of the day. Amara's connection to the violin transcended mere proficiency. It was an extraordinary bond, a facet of herself she guarded closely, intertwined with cherished memories of her grandmother. That violin bow, more than just wood and horsehair, was the tangible legacy of the woman who had nurtured her while her mother worked tirelessly. Each touch brought a sense of inner equilibrium. Room 117 was already a cacophony of tuning instruments and teenage chatter, a grating symphony to her sensitive ears. Mr. Darnell, the instructor, stood at the front, his back to the class, engrossed in the whiteboard. His ill-fitting gray blazer and a strained air of confidence colored his pronouncements. Turning, he announced with enthusiasm one might reserve for a new piece of furniture, "We have a new addition, Amara Jennings, joining us for the semester." A subtle nod was her acknowledgement as she found a seat in the back, her case resting on the floor. A few fleeting glances met her, but the prevailing currents of adolescent drama soon reclaimed their attention. Mr. Darnell offered no welcome, no inquiries about her musical background, his gaze sweeping the room with an air of preemptive annoyance. The subsequent fortnights saw Amara establish a routine of quiet assimilation. Her participation in group rehearsals was deliberately understated, a soft blending into the collective sound. Attention was not her aim, yet it found her nonetheless. Her sheet music was meticulously annotated, her posture impeccable, her bow hand unwavering. Some students discerned a depth of skill she deliberately concealed. During a tuning session, a girl named Brianna leaned over, remarking, "You play with more soul than Darnell's favorites, and you're not even trying." Amara offered a slight smile, adjusting her rosin. However, her unassuming confidence seemed to chafe Mr. Darnell. Perhaps it was her lack of solicitousness, her refusal to vie for his approval like others. Whatever the cause, a palpable tension was building, a sense that he was biding his time. By the third week, Amara had mapped the social and physical geography of Southridge. She knew the recalcitrant lockers, the lenient teachers, the students whose boisterousness masked insecurity. She moved through the hallways with quiet grace, headphones around her neck, sketchbook tucked under her arm, the ever-present violin case, its worn black surface bearing the faded initials JJ near the handle. Mr. Glenn Darnell stood apart from the general staff. His voice, though not loud, possessed a resonant quality that commanded attention, underscored by a sharp, almost brittle tone that prompted students to straighten up, not out of respect, but out of a desire to avoid the ensuing discomfort. 12 years he had presided over the Southridge Orchestra. Rumors, tinged with a sense of faded glory, circulated about a past as a serious musician, perhaps even a touring chamber player. In class, favoritism was blatant. The same cadre of 4 or 5 students consistently occupied first chair, the recipients of solos and effusive praise, often those from families with deep pockets or a visible presence at school events. The rest were the ensemble's background, the supporting voices. Amara recognized her position, invisible and by her design, until one Monday afternoon, during a rehearsal of a Mozart string ensemble. Mr. Darnell's mood was particularly acrid. A cello student's forgotten sheet music became the catalyst for a public reprimand, a copy tossed onto the stand with a sarcastic directive, "Try not to inconvenience everyone." From her quiet corner, Amara observed the scene. Darnell's gaze swept the room, settling abruptly on her. "Jennings." Amara looked up, her fingers poised on the edge of her bow. "You've been remarkably quiet," he stated, a smirk playing on his lips. A ripple of snickers spread through the room. "Nearly a month, isn't it? I believe it's time we graced our ears with your contribution." A knot tightened in Amara's chest, not from fear, but from a sudden, unwelcome exposure. She hadn't prepared a solo, not for this audience, certainly not under this man's judgmental gaze. Yet, she rose, her movements deliberate, her violin lifted with care. "Excellent," Darnell declared, stepping aside with a theatrical flourish. "Let's ascertain the extent of your so-called magic." The word hung in the air, laced with derision. His tone dared her to falter. Amara remained composed. She brought the violin to her chin, her eyes closed for a fleeting moment as she drew a slow breath. But before she could play, Darnell interjected, "Don't fret. We shall endeavor to temper our critique." A few stifled laughs punctuated the air, the kind that sting with quiet cruelty. Amara opened her eyes, her gaze fixed on a point beyond him, beyond the room. She played. A single note, then another, a slow, haunting melody from a piece unfamiliar to most present, unostentatious, understated, yet imbued with a precise, fluid vitality. Her bow seemed to dance. The atmosphere in the room shifted, yet Darnell remained unmoved, his arms crossed, his jaw clenched. The unspoken thoughts seemed almost audible. Where did she acquire such skill? Who does she imagine herself to be? Amara continued, her fingers gliding across the strings, the music elevating the room with each measure. An absolute stillness descended. When the final note faded, the silence pressed against the walls. She lowered her instrument, stepping back to her seat. Darnell said nothing. A hushed "damn" echoed from the back. Amara resumed her seat as if nothing extraordinary had transpired, yet everything had changed. The shift in the room was palpable. But Darnell was not one to concede. The following day, the classroom possessed a different energy, not boisterous, but charged, as if an unspoken narrative had unfolded, and everyone awaited the subsequent chapter. Amara entered as usual, headphones around her neck, violin case in hand, settling into her back row seat without making eye contact. Yet, she felt the weight of surreptitious glances, hushed whispers even from those who had previously ignored her. Darnell was at the front, his back to the class, seemingly oblivious. Amara preferred this anonymity. She sought no accolades, no validation, only to remain outside the fray. But Mr. Darnell was not one to allow silence to linger. Midway through the lesson, he clapped his hands. "All right, let's deviate slightly from our routine." The room fell silent. Today, a brief solo rotation. A few measures each, a cappella. Groans rippled through the class. "Jennings," he announced, his gaze finding her. "Why don't you commence?" It was not a request. Amara hesitated, not out of trepidation, but out of a weary recognition of his intent. This was not about musical appreciation. It was about asserting control, about placing her once again under public scrutiny. Slowly, deliberately, she opened her case, her hands moving with the ingrained precision born of countless hours of practice in a cramped apartment, the ever-present hum of the fan a constant accompaniment. She stood. But before she could lift her violin, Darnell offered a dry chuckle. "Let's hope yesterday wasn't merely a fluke." Nervous laughter rippled through the class. Some averted their gazes, others fixed them on Amara, anticipating her reaction. She remained impassive, wordless. She played. This time, it was more than a response. It was a declaration. The initial notes sliced through the air with an unbidden authority. She chose a passage from Shostakovich, uncompromising, demanding virtuosity. The class held its breath. Darnell retreated a step. She played for 20, perhaps 30 seconds. When she stopped, the silence was absolute, as if the very walls had been holding their breath. Darnell offered a tight, strained smile. Impressive, he conceded, for someone who doesn't exactly project the conservatory type. The air crackled. No one laughed. Even his usual sycophants appeared stunned. Amara froze, her gaze meeting his, sharp yet composed. No tears, no dramatic exit, just a steady, unwavering stare. Darnell moved on, feigning nonchalance. All right, let's continue. Jonah, your turn. Jonah's hands trembled slightly. That was messed up, Brianna whispered from a few seats away. Amara slowly sat, her violin resting on her lap, her fingers still curled around the bow, her heartbeat a steady, deliberate rhythm. That afternoon, she bypassed her next class, heading directly to the counselor's office. Not to report him, not a word about the preceding events. Her request was simple: information on extracurricular music clubs. Miss Diana Bright, the counselor, a woman with a kind smile and knowing eyes, tilted her head. You're the girl from yesterday, aren't you? Amara hesitated, then nodded. You've created quite a stir in the music department. 2 teachers were asking about you. Amara's gaze fell. I just want a space where I can play without it becoming something else. Ms. Bright studied her for a moment, then opened a drawer, producing a flyer. There's a youth program downtown, Saturday mornings. They value your playing, regardless of your background. Amara took the flyer and left in silence. But in the close confines of a school, news travels swiftly. By Thursday, the whispers had gained momentum, echoing through the cafeteria, down the corridors, into classrooms far removed from the music wing. Teachers offered no direct commentary, yet their gazes held a newfound curiosity, a silent attempt to reconcile the rumors with the quiet girl they had previously overlooked. Mr. Darnell, however, maintained a facade of normalcy, his dry humor and sharp remarks unchanged, his posture rigidly erect, as if sheer will could compensate for a lack of genuine authority. But the students were no longer laughing. Their attention was now divided, a silent observation of both instructor and student. Friday arrived swiftly, bringing the final orchestra period of the week. Amara had contemplated absence, even reaching the halfway point to the front office before a change of heart. Fear was not the motivator, but a weariness of offering him further opportunities to demean something she held sacred. She entered, taking her usual seat, her violin case a silent companion against her leg. The room pulsed with a palpable anticipation. Even the habitually disruptive students sat with an unusual stillness. Mr. Darnell cleared his throat. Before we commence rehearsal, I wish to offer one of our students an opportunity to showcase her true capabilities. He omitted her name, yet none were in doubt. Amara looked up slowly. He offered a curt nod, as if bestowing a great honor. Jennings, would you be amenable to performing a piece of your choosing? Every eye converged on her. The room held its breath. She rose, her violin in hand, taking a few steps forward. No pressure, Darnell offered with a saccharine smile. We are merely curious about your training. Amara recognized the maneuver, a final attempt to confine her. Either she would crumble under the scrutiny, or she would soar, casting his inadequacy into sharp relief. She chose to disregard him entirely. Closing her eyes, she conjured the image of her grandmother's small apartment on Union Avenue, the ever-present hum of the radio, her young fingers pressing against the strings until they ached. She recalled countless weekends dedicated to scales instead of leisure, every competition where judges held low expectations until the first note resonated. E.T.Ella Joe, not something delicate, not something safe. She chose Shostakovich's Violin Concerto No. 1, a piece unforgiving in its demands, requiring either mastery or complete surrender. Her lips moved almost imperceptibly, as if she knew the path before her fingers even touched the strings. Fingers flying, tempo rising, The room seemed to dissolve, one note at a time. She did not look at Darnell, did not glance at her classmates. She simply played. And something in the room irrevocably shifted, not with dramatic gasps or applause, but with a profound stillness, as if time itself had paused to listen. Even the air felt different. When she finished, she did not immediately look up. She lowered the violin, exhaled slowly, and stood in quietude. The room remained silent, not out of an inability to articulate a response, but because they were processing the profound beauty they had just witnessed. Mr. Darnell opened his mouth, as if to speak, but no sound emerged. Amara turned and walked back to her seat. No applause, no commentary, just a silence that spoke volumes. After class, a cello player approached her in the hallway. "Yo, that was... I've never heard anything like that," he murmured, his voice hushed with reverence. Amara offered a small nod. Brianna joined them. Darnell's face looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. They shared a quiet, genuine laugh. "Are you going to do the spring concert?" Brianna asked. "I don't know yet." "You should." He can't hide behind sarcasm forever. But Mr. Darnell had no intention of hiding. He was preparing his defense, in his own twisted way. The following week began with a silence unlike the resonant quietude after Amara's performance. This silence was heavy, strange, as if the entire school held its breath, anticipating an unnamed event. Amara maintained her routine, head down, backpack slung over one shoulder, violin case her constant companion, yet her steps felt heavier. It was not fear, nor pride, but that liminal space where a significant event has occurred, yet the world around remains unchanged. By second period on Monday, she was summoned to the front office. No explanation was offered. She simply went. Principal Marcia Lindley sat behind her desk, her hands folded, her expression a blend of kindness and weariness. Another man was present, Assistant Superintendent Joseph Langley, sharp suit, thin smile, his attention fixed on a file. "Amara," Principal Lindley began, "we've received several calls from parents and faculty over the weekend. Some highly complimentary, others concerned." Amara remained silent. "Mr. Darnell has submitted a report stating that your performance last Friday disrupted class activities, that your behavior was intentionally performative and disrespectful to the rehearsal structure." The accusation hung in the air. Amara blinked. That was it. Langley finally looked up. "He says you undermine his authority." Principal Lindley shifted in her seat. "However, 3 other students submitted written accounts praising your performance. 2 staff members who weren't even present stated they'd heard about it within hours." Amara exhaled slowly. "I didn't mean to disrespect anyone." "I believe you," Lindley said, "but I must ask, did he make any inappropriate comments?" Amara hesitated. She could have recounted the words, quoted him verbatim, allowed the system to intervene. But something held her back, not doubt in her own experience, but a weariness of the likely outcome, adult words against hers, meetings, rumors, perhaps even a veiled reprimand disguised as protocol. "I just want to play," she said softly. That was all she had ever wanted. Lindley nodded slowly. "You will still be allowed to participate in class and upcoming performances. If you feel uncomfortable at any point, I want you to come here immediately." Langley offered no comment, closing the file and departing without a backward glance. In class, the dynamic had shifted. Mr. Darnell did not acknowledge her presence. No direct address, barely a glance. The overt tension had dissipated, replaced by a cold indifference. He acted as if she were invisible. But the students saw. More began to approach her with questions. "Where did you learn to play like that? Can you teach me? Are you involved in any after-school music programs?" Even some of Darnell's favorites began to drift, their attention no longer solely fixed on him. That Thursday, an unexpected encounter occurred. Amara was at her locker when Ms. Deanna Bright, the counselor, approached. "Are you free after school?" Amara nodded. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." Later that afternoon, in a quiet corner of the music wing, Ms. Bright introduced Amara to Ms. Thelma Rowe, director of the Bakersfield Youth Ensemble. Ms. Rowe exuded the quiet elegance of someone at home in concert halls. Her voice was warm, her eyes sharp. "I've heard about you," she said. "The way people speak, one would think you commanded the stage with fire in your hands." Amara offered a faint smile. Ms. Rowe leaned in. "We have an opening for our spring showcase. You would be the youngest soloist we've featured in 5 years. I want you to be part of it." Amara hesitated. "What if my school finds out?" "They likely will," Ms. Rowe replied, "but they won't be able to do a thing about it." That night, Amara practiced with a fervor she hadn't felt in months. Her grandmother's bow felt steady in her hand, as if it possessed an innate understanding of the path forward. But Southridge and Mr. Darnell were not quite finished. By the second week of March, a subtle division permeated Southridge. Some students regarded Amara with nascent admiration. A few others whispered just loud enough to be heard, "Teacher's pet, thinks she's better than everyone. She made him look bad on purpose." And then there were the teachers, some offering warmer smiles in the hallways, others deliberately averting their gaze. On Monday morning, Principal Linley's calm, neutral voice echoed over the intercom. "We will be hosting a student forum this Friday in the library after school to discuss equity and respectful environments within our classrooms. Participation is voluntary." No names were mentioned, no accusations made, yet the underlying subject was palpable. Mr. Darnell was absent from class that day. A substitute, clearly unprepared, informed the students that Mr. Darnell had taken a few days of personal leave. Knowing glances were exchanged, but no questions were voiced. Amara offered no reaction, her focus solely on tuning her violin. The forum arrived quickly. Initially, Amara had no intention of attending. Public attention was anathema to her. But Ms. Bright intercepted her in the hallway on Thursday afternoon. "You should be there. You don't have to speak if you don't wish to, but you deserve to hear what is being said." So she went. The library was filled, students, teachers, even a few parents. A small panel sat at the front, Principal Linley, Ms. Bright, and 2 student leaders. A boy named Mateo spoke first, his voice earnest. "Some teachers mistake silence for respect, but sometimes we are silent because we don't feel safe to speak." Then Brianna stood, her gaze direct. "We witnessed something unfair in class. We all saw it, and most of us remained silent. That reflects on us too." Amara listened, her hands resting in her lap, her fingers twitching almost imperceptibly, as if rehearsing silent scales. Finally, a voice from the audience asked, "Can the student this is about say something?" The room turned. Amara rose slowly. She did not approach the microphone. She simply spoke, her voice clear and steady. "I did not seek to be a lesson," she stated. "I came here to learn like everyone else. I never asked to be singled out. I simply played when I was asked." The room was silent. And when someone suggests that your voice, your talent, does not belong in a space, that feeling lingers, even when you know better, even when you have dedicated your life to proving otherwise. A parent raised a hand. "Are you saying the teacher was prejudiced?" Amara paused. "I am saying he made a choice, and he made it in front of all of you. You decide what you witnessed." Ms. Bright watched her with an expression that suggested she saw something larger than just one student's experience. Following the forum, students approached Amara quietly, respectfully. Some shared their own stories, other classes, other moments, instances where they had lacked the courage to speak. The next morning, Amara found a note tucked inside her locker. Typed, anonymous, it read, "You reminded us what it sounds like when truth is played without fear." That evening, Ms. Rowe confirmed Amara's slot in the downtown showcase, April 22nd. Meanwhile, Southridge initiated an internal review. It wasn't labeled an investigation, but that was its essence. Teachers were asked to reflect on their classroom practices. Mr. Darnell returned a week later, quieter, colder, visibly uncomfortable. He avoided Amara completely. She didn't mind. Her music was no longer for him. It was for the boy in the 3rd row who had started bringing his violin home again, for the teacher who had finally seen what she had missed, for the girl who used to hide her sheet music, believing no one cared. Her true stage was approaching, and its voice would resonate far beyond any classroom. Downtown Bakersfield Civic Center was not opulent, but under the soft stage lights and the low murmur of anticipation, it felt immense. Families filled the seats, dressed in weekend attire, some clutching flowers, others simply radiating excitement. The youth ensemble's spring showcase drew a respectable crowd annually, but this year held a different current. The program had circulated online, and one name had begun to garner attention: Amara Jennings, soloist, age 14. Backstage, Amara waited, her heels tapping softly on the floor, her violin case open beside her. Inside, her grandmother's bow gleamed, clean, polished, steady. Ms. Rowe entered quietly. Ready? Amara looked up. I think so. You don't need to prove anything, not to them, not to me, just to yourself. Amara nodded once. When her name was announced, there was no raucous cheering, just the kind of hush that descends when everyone is eager to listen intently. She walked out, her demeanor calm and assured, her posture perfect, her fingers relaxed. The microphone captured the soft scrape of her bow finding the strings, and then she played. No dramatic introduction, no artifice, just pure sound. She played with control, yet without rigidity, with emotion, yet with precision. Each note wove a narrative yet unread, and somehow, without uttering a single word, she drew the entire auditorium into a profound silence, not just of admiration, but of reflection. When the final note faded, the applause did not erupt immediately. A half-second of breathless pause preceded the gathering of hands, louder, stronger, building. Some in the audience stood. Others wiped away tears. In the third row, Ms. Bright stood too, as did Brianna. Backstage, Amara sat down on the folding chair, her hands trembling, not from nerves, but from a sense of release. It was done. A local arts blogger lauded the performance the following morning, calling her a prodigy with poise. The story was picked up by a local paper, then a regional newsletter. Nothing monumental, but enough to be seen, enough to echo at school. Mr. Darnell remained in his corner, his silence a stark contrast to the reverberations of Amara's performance. Word circulated that he had been asked to step down from a leadership role. No public reprimand, no apology, just quiet consequences. He continued to conduct his classes, but the sharpness had dulled, the swagger vanished. Some students noticed. Others did not care. Amara noticed, and she chose to remain silent on the matter. 2 weeks later, she was invited to perform at a small youth panel on representation in the arts. At the end, a girl, perhaps 12, approached her, clutching her mother's hand. "You look like me," the girl said. "I thought only famous people could play like that." Amara knelt slightly. "You don't need fame, just patience and a little fire." That night, Amara sat on the balcony at home with her mother, the city lights twinkling below. Her violin rested beside her, untouched. "You didn't let it change you," her mother said softly. Amara gazed out at the darkness. "It changed the way I see things, but I'm still me." Her mother nodded. "Your grandmother would have wept." They both laughed, and for the first time, Amara allowed herself to feel a quiet pride, not because she was superior, but because she had accomplished what she had set out to do. She had made her music speak louder than their doubt, louder than the teacher who had tried to diminish her, louder than every dismissive glance she had ever received. She hadn't retaliated with words, she had fought with her gift, and it was enough. If someone tries to confine you, remember you are not made of limitations. You are made of everything they failed to understand. Let your voice be the thing they hear long after they stop listening. Subscribe if stories like this resonate with you, because some truths deserve to be told clearly, powerfully, and without apology. You could almost hear the thoughts running behind his eyes. You shook up the whole music wing. Amara kept her usual rhythm. "We've had several calls from parents and faculty over the weekend." Her voice was warm. Things they'd never had the nerve to talk about. Untouched. "You didn't let it change you."